Good evening. I'll call the July 15, 2020 meeting of the Lebanon City Council to order. Ask the city manager to make his statement regarding our remote meeting policy.
This meeting is being conducted virtually in accordance with the provisions of RSA 91A and emergency order number 12 issued by the governor of the state of Hampshire. Meeting is being conducted virtually because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not practical or safe for the board to meet in person. Therefore, it is being conducted virtually, nor is it practical for the general public to participate in person. So the public is allowed to participate electronically as well by computer link, through Microsoft Teams, or by phone.
Want to make the statement on the call in and let it know?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Sorry.
If you are calling in, I don't see anybody doing that right now, but if somebody does wish to call in, they need to dial *6, and that will allow you to speak when you're recognized by the mayor to do so at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Councilor Braun, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, any member of the public who desires to speak on any item may do so when that item is taken up by the council, and you'll be allowed to speak on the subject for not more than 3 minutes. We ask you to state your name. We don't take anonymous comments. If you live in Lebanon, please state your ward of residence if you know. We traditionally open these meetings by having a brief period where members of the public or members of the council can address any issues that are not on the agenda for this evening. Is there anyone who would like to discuss anything that is not on the agenda for this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the agenda. Roll call. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we will do a roll call of councilors to see who's here tonight. I see Councilor Bronner and myself, Mayor McNamara, and let's see who else we have. Councilor Heisted.
Councilor Heisted here and alone.
Thank you. Councilor Sykes.
Councilor Sykes is here.
Thank you.
And alone.
Assistant Mayor Belo.
Assistant Mayor Belo's here. My wife's in the room, but we'll be in separate rooms shortly.
Okay. Councilor Hill.
Councilor Hill is present and alone.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice.
Councilor Prentice. Just my dog and I.
Councilor Zook. Okay, we don't have Councilor Zook quite yet, but I'm sure we will before long. Councilor Winnie.
Councilor Winnie is present and all by myself.
Thank you very much. So it must be Councilor Zook that will be just a couple of minutes late, but will be here. So we will recognize her when she signs on. Okay, we have a couple of important recognitions tonight. The first is a retirement, which we always hate to see, but in this case, and in most cases, very, very well deserved. So I will read the resolution into the record here. This is a resolution honoring Christian A. Simon. Whereas Christian A. Simon has devoted himself to a career in public service, having served as a firefighter since July 23rd, 1990, and as a captain in the Lebanon Fire Department since October 14th, 2005. And whereas Christian has demonstrated those many attributes essential to his position as a captain in the Lebanon Fire Department, playing an intricate part in keeping our fire department's vehicles and apparatus ready. And whereas Christian has conducted himself in an open and forthright fashion, reflecting credit upon himself and his profession, always demonstrating the many attributes essential to his position, and continually giving himself freely and unselfishly. And whereas Christian has earned the respect, the confidence, and the friendship of his fellow co-workers, business associates, and the many citizens he has served in his 30-year tenure as a firefighter and fire officer with the Lebanon Fire Department. Therefore, be it resolved that we, as members of the Lebanon City Council, on behalf of the citizenry of Lebanon, Christian's friends, fellow employees, and associates, express our admiration of and respect for the career of our outstanding and faithful employee, and extend to him our sincere gratitude and wish him very well in his retirement. Be it further resolved that this resolution be written upon the minutes of the Lebanon City Council meeting, and a copy be presented to Christian A. Simon, dated this 15th day of July 2020 at Lebanon, New Hampshire. Timothy J. McNamara, Mayor, on behalf of the Lebanon City Council. Congratulations, Christian. I see the chief is online, and I expect he wants to say a few words. Chief, I saw you.
Looks like he froze up.
He's probably just very emotional. Chief, I'm going to give you a second to come back on. Well, perhaps we'll hear from the chief later. In the meantime, congratulations, Christian, and wish you well in your retirement. Yes, Councilor Sykes, you will fill in for the chief.
Yeah, I would be happy to, actually. I didn't want to preempt him, but a lot of people wouldn't know this, but I was actually acting chief of the Lebanon Fire Department, or co-chief, I guess I would call it, back in 1990 when we made a decision to hire Chris. I thought at the time that knowing that his father was involved in the fire service up near Berlin, Vermont, and knowing this young man had worked hard to try and get where he needed to be a firefighter, I thought it was a great hire for the city. Time has proven to be correct based on his hard efforts, and the city has been lucky to have him. I can't believe it's been 30 years, but life is full of transitions, and Chris, I hope that you have a wonderful transition into that time of life which we call retirement.
Thank you, Councilor Sykes, and I assume you were what, 25 when this happened?
I think Chris might have been, but I wasn't.
Okay. And the chief is back with us.
Yeah, we had a little technical difficulty. So, I know Captain Simon has a few words that he'll want to say in a minute or so, but certainly we will miss his experience, his mindset in a lot of ways, but I'm happy to report to the council and citizens that we're not completely getting rid of him yet. He's expressed interest in staying on as a call firefighter, and I've graciously accepted that, and that will reflect in his the paperwork moving forward as of his official date of retire on the 18th. So tonight is his last shift. There's a number of firefighters here in the room with me and him, and I will bring him up and let him say a couple words. But thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor McNamara, for your words, as well as Councilor Sykes. I too do remember that day, a long time ago, but I remember it. I'll keep it very brief. This has been my pleasure to serve the citizens of Lebanon and the visitors for the past 30 years. I look forward to what's coming up next, and I thank all of you for the time that you spend on your side of the screen doing what you do as well. You are also serve the city well. I just wanted to thank the council for the work that they do. So that's it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Thank you, Chris. I assume you'll be starting with your retirement list tomorrow.
Yep.
Your list of projects.
Yes, I have a long list of projects that will probably grow before the evening's out.
That would be my guess.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilor Sykes. Okay, our second recognition tonight is a little different, and this is to the Fountain Working Group, and specifically to Priscilla Goslin and Linda Mae Peck. And those of us who know these two ladies know how hard they have worked over many years now to make Lebanon a better place, a more unique place, and a more beautiful place. So I'd like to read this resolution into the record. Whereas the Fountain Working Group of the City of Lebanon Heritage Commission has served the committee since 1997 when it was formed by the City Council as the Carter Fountain Committee through July 2020. And whereas the Fountain Working Group has demonstrated a significant benefit to the city through the leadership of Priscilla Goslin and Linda Maypack, among many other local organizations, volunteers, and businesses, being fully dedicated to the beautification, arts, and cultural heritage of the city, and generous in the time and resources donated to related efforts. And whereas Linda May was an original and continuous member of the Heritage Commission, as well as chairperson of the Dana House Committee, and has acted as the primary liaison to the city for numerous fountain initiatives. And whereas Priscilla and her family have cultivated numerous relationships to support fountain projects and build awareness of them, and meticulously maintain record of these contributions. And whereas the Fountain Working Group's commitments to restore Lebanon as the city of fountains has resulted in significant achievements including funding, design, restoration, and assembly, as well as various partnerships required to establish the Carter Memorial Fountain, the Coburn Park Fountain, the water feature in the Robert H. Levitt Memorial Park on High Street, the Lebanon Mall Fountain, and most recently, the Glenwood Cemetery Fountain. And whereas the above accomplishments of the Fountain Working Group progress goals of the Lebanon Master Plan by adding uniqueness and character to our city's gateways and open spaces, contributing to a sense of community identity, bringing people to relaxing and pleasing local attractions, and honoring Lebanon's history. And explicitly, as the fountains represent well-placed public art to highlight the meaning of a place. And whereas the Fountain Working Group, from the girl with the umbrella to turtles and dolphins on a pedestal, have thus left an enduring legacy for present and future generations to enjoy and to be inspired by. Now therefore be it resolved that the Lebanon City Council, on behalf of the City of Lebanon, extends its sincere appreciation to the Fountain Working Group and its partners for their dedicated service and contributions to the community over the past 23 years. Dated this 15th day of July 2020 at Lebanon, New Hampshire. Timothy McNamara, Mayor, on behalf of the Lebanon City Council. Thank you very much to Priscilla, Linda May, and all of the folks who have participated in and helped the Fountain Working Group over the last 2 decades. You have indeed left a very enduring legacy to the city, and it's much appreciated. So thank you very much. Okay, now on to the more mundane items on the agenda. Acceptance of minutes from the July 1st, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes? Okay, you may have, I have just a couple of items. On page 20 of our current packet, line 11, there's a line that says, Chief Mello said the incident in Minneapolis shocked the conscience of the LPD, and I think he meant conscience, C-O-N-S-C-I-E-N-C-E, conscience of the department. Next item is on page 24 of the packet. This would be line 21. Mayor McNamara informed the council about a new business who is starting up to provide broadband. And what I was referring to is the new business entity that's being started by the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative to provide broadband to their rural constituents. I was using that as an example of an organization that had the ability, which we don't have, to establish an entity to seek funding to help rural broadband. And the last item that I had is on page 25, line 4, talks about Main Street demolition. We are not demolishing Main Street. It's the Westboro Yard demolition. Those are the 3 items I had. Does anyone else have any corrections to the minutes? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I have a question.
Yes, absolutely. Councilor Winning.
I think the Main Street demolition you referenced on line 4 is referring to the house. that is condemned?
Oh, that would be 387 North Main Street. That could be. Let's look
Yeah.
back and see. Yes, you are correct. Thank you, Council Winnie. When I see Main Street, I thought Westboro Yard. He is correct. It's the 387? 387 North Main Street house demolition. Thank you. It's not Westboro Yard, although we wish it was. And was someone going to make a motion? I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Council Prentice? You're muted.
Sorry about that. So I'll make a motion to move the minutes of Wednesday, July 1st.
Okay.
Lebanon.
Thank you. Would someone like to second that?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Heisen. Motions are made and seconded to approve the minutes of July 1st with corrections as noted. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilor Heisen?
Council Heisted votes aye.
Councilor Sykes?
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Councilor Hill?
Counselor Hill votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice?
Counselor Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner?
Councilor Bronner abstains.
Councilor Bronner abstains. Okay. Assistant Mayor Bealow?
Councilor Bealow votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Winnie?
Counselor Winnie votes aye.
Okay, and is Councilor Zook with us yet? Here she's not. Okay, so the motion passes for the minutes as revised. Okay, appointments. The agenda that went out initially had none. In fact, we do have one appointment this evening. It's to the Class 6 Roads Committee. It's Stephen Wood. I interviewed former Councilor Wood, and I enthusiastically support his nomination to the committee. Steve was one of the original members of the committee and was with it for many, many years. He has great institutional knowledge of the Class 6 roads in the city, and I think he will help forward the classification of the remaining roads process very effectively. He's certainly demonstrated an ability to be very fair and open-minded about the fate of the Class 6 roads, and I think he'd be a great addition. So I heartily support and nominate him for that position. I don't believe this requires a second. We'll just take a voice vote unless someone else wants to speak to the nomination.
I'll
Yes.
say that Steve was a very valuable and active member of the Class 6 Roads Committee for many years and brings many insights as a landowner of rural land in Lebanon and sees both sides of the problem very equitably. So I recommend his inclusion highly.
Thank you very much, Councilor Heisen. So let's take a vote. Councilor Heisen?
Council Heisted votes aye.
Thank you. Councilor Sykes?
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Councilor Hill?
Counselor Hill votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice?
Counselor Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner?
Bruce Bronner votes yes.
Thank you. Assistant Mayor Bealow?
Bealow votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Winnie?
Counselor Winnie votes aye.
I don't believe Councilor Zook is with us yet, and I vote yes. So that passes, and Steve is appointed to the Class 6 Road Committee. Okay, moving on to our public hearing items. The first item we have is Ordinance 2020-07. This is a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public input and taking action to repeal and replace City Code Chapter 124, use of the public stormwater system, and we'll start off with a presentation by staff.
Okay, this, as you know, we've been working on we started off with our sewer ordinances, made considerable changes to those, and we made changes to the Chapter 182, which are water-related ordinances. In fact, we have another piece of that tonight, follow up to this. And it was time to work on our stormwater ordinance, and that needed quite a bit of change. We did not have a permitting process prior to hopefully the approval of this system, which will allow that permitting process to go. There are 60 communities in our state, they're all in the southern tier of our state, that have to comply with what's called the MS4 permitting process to EPA for discharge of stormwater. They're required to have a permit from EPA. That started out with a small number. They added 13 communities in 2008. Well, it was supposed to add in 2008. They didn't get added until like 2015. It took quite a while for EPA to do that. But eventually that will encompass all the communities in the state, including us. Now, when the city, there was a settlement agreement or administrative agreement with EPA regarding CSOs. When that was agreed to by the city, there were components of what would be MS4 provisions already in there. So we've already adopted some of those, and now basically the stormwater ordinance puts in the pieces of that to do that, to get us in the direction we need to be in, and starting to address the issues that when the time does come and the city is subject to the MS4 provisions, that permit requirement, we're going to be in a lot better spot than, of course, we were before. So that's the goal of this. And also, it cleans up quite a few other issues. Since I've been here, we've had 2 agreements that I've signed with parties to enter into our storm water system. And there was no permit process, no defined process by which that is done, and now we do have that. And hopefully that will streamline it, make it easier for the landowners that wish to do that. There are a number of pieces that I want to talk about, and just by reading those, that might have been subtle, you might not have picked them up. Basically, what this says, and this is model language that you see of typical MS4 communities, is anybody who is presently in our stormwater system that is not specifically permitted is therefore not permitted, and they are required to get a permit to tie into that system. So you may have houses that date back to the 1800s or even earlier that tied into what was the city's stormwater system or components thereof that never were required of a permit at that time, or they might have been given verbal permission, and who knows what authorization to do that. This now requires a formal permit to do that. So anybody who is presently tied in, who doesn't have that permit, does need to obtain one. Now, that presents a number of issues that we try to address these with this ordinance about existing situations where we have what would be considered stormwater discharges into our sewer system. We still have those throughout the city. We've talked about this before. Those are illegal. They're illegal by federal and state, federal regulations and state statutes. They're not allowed to occur, but they're pre-existing, and we all know they exist in pretty much every community in the country. When we did the CSO work, a lot of those were separated in those particular neighborhoods where that occurred, but not all of them. And we certainly have other neighborhoods where we have not had CSO work done, where we have foundation drains, maybe roof leaders, and sump pumps that are tied into our sewer system. Those do need to be separated. When we do work in a particular neighborhood, our plan is to help facilitate that to occur. Now, the permit requires if someone's going to build a new building or add on to an existing building, when they get their permit, they're going to have to show what the flow is they're going to be putting into our system. So that way we know the system can handle that. And if the system can't handle that, they're going to be required to upgrade that system. Now, existing structures, existing residential structures, let's say we've got, I'll use an example. Let's say Kimball Street or one of those streets in that area over there, Green, Elm, any of those that have not been, those neighborhoods have not been impacted by the CSO project, so we haven't gone in there to fix our storm drain system. So we have an old storm drain system in there, and we're going to have people that may have some pumps that are tied into our sewer system. As you know, our plan is, in our CIP, as you're going to see that coming on, is to separate those out of them when we do that work. We want to make that as inexpensive as it possibly can be. So what we're going to do, what we're proposing to do, is we are going to require those folks to separate those connections for stormwater into our sanitary sewer system and either put them in our stormwater system or have some other means to deal with their stormwater. We are not going to require those people to have an engineering study or to show what sort of an impact they're going to have on the system. That would be very expensive for them to do, and we really want them to get out of the sanitary sewer and into the storm drain system. We also know in neighborhoods like that, the storm drain system is not adequate. You can see that in any heavy rainstorm that occurs. Well, we do have to get them out of the sanitary system. So there's only really 2 choices. One, they can take the sump pump and pump it out into the ground, which is going to end up in the street and cause potentially street flooding. Or we can put them into the storm drain system that we have if they wish to do that. which will help carry that away. Now, that's going to overload that system. We understand that, especially until it gets replaced. But either way, that water has to go someplace. And that's the bad option, for lack of a better way to explain it, than trying to allow them to stay in the sanitary sewer system, which is illegal. So our goal is to minimize that impact on them. The other part of that is, I've had these discussions with DPWs to get information out well in advance that we're going to be doing this work, so that homeowners and property owners can make plans to do their part of it, because they're going to have to hire a contractor in many cases to conduct that separation and get into our storm drain system. We want to minimize the impact. We don't want them to pay the highway degradation fees. We want to minimize that impact. We don't even want to charge them a permit fee. That's our plan moving forward on that. So their only costs, which are significant costs, is going to be the contractor to move that pipe from one pipe to another, for lack of, to make it simple. So that's one of our goals with this project. So I want to make sure you're aware of those two key pieces, that any connections are going to be considered non-permitted until people apply for a permit. And we have that caveat for existing connections into our sewer system that want to take out and move. The other part of that is, we've got the circumstances where we have 4 drains and houses, and we also have oil tanks, which on some occasions will flip over and they'll discharge. We've had this happen, discharge oil into our sewer system if they're tied in back, or into our storm drain system. We have an obligation to make sure we do everything to prevent that from occurring. So one of our requirements is, and you will see it in the ordinance, is they're going to have to put some sort of barrier material in there, whether it be a concrete lip, for lack of a better term, or some other method to at least try to capture as much of that oil before it goes into our storm drain system, which would cause pollution, obviously, in the river and wetlands that the water may travel through. So those are 2 key components I want to make sure that you're aware of. That may not have been apparent by simply reading the proposed code that we have in there.
So I unfortunately have a lot of experience in this in a past life, and the manager is obviously correct in that by federal law and state statute, you cannot connect features, and some pumps are sort of the most classic, or roof leaders, into the sanitary sewer. It takes up capacity, number one, and it offers the opportunity for other contaminants to get into the sanitary sewer system. So they do have to be disconnected and put into the storm sewer. There are different ways to do this. If someone is a distance from the street, and perhaps they have a low spot on their property that can safely accumulate water even during a rain event, they could potentially pump to there, and that could serve as a storage area. They could do a dry well. They could do a lot of things, but they've got to get that pipe out of the basement and to some way, and to some place that's not connected to the sanitary sewer. So there may be more than one way to skin a cat here in terms of accomplishing this. So I think this is very worthwhile. I think it's necessary to do by law. It's part of our sewer separation project or program. So I know this was a long section. It took me a couple of times to read through it myself, but I think it is worthwhile, and I certainly would entertain, as with the manager, any questions regarding it. Welcome, Councilor Zoe. You're muted. That's all right. So does anyone have any questions regarding this before we open it to the public?
This is Councilor Hill. I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead. We'll open the public hearing in a bit.
Sure, and I think you answered it, Tim, but I wasn't sure whether I had heard the city manager talk about this. I recall that that the roof leaders were also an issue when we were talking about CSO. So I just wanted to make sure that they were also being included in this.
Yes, they are. Yeah, even though roof water typically is pretty clean, it's capacity. It's a capacity issue. So yeah, they're included, as well as some pumps in the basement.
And how are we going to be informing people? Do we know where these places are, or do we at least have a sense of where they might be based on, I don't know, the difference between the I&I and the, do we have results from the CSO that help us pinpoint, or what's the process for getting in touch with people who may be in this situation?
So when we do a project on a particular street, like we know we're planning that Kimball Street project, we'll send notices to all those folks and help them through that particular, the whole process to get to that. So they'll get a written notice of that. And we use smoke testing a lot of times to be able, because we don't know where they are. You know, we have the sewer lateral that goes to the edge of the roadway, and then these connections are normally in the basement of the house, so we don't even know that they exist other than through smoke testing and that sort of thing that we can do.
So where we have an existing project planned, we do have the ability to reach out to the homeowners in those areas individually, and I'm sure we'll put out something on the city website. This is going to take some time to catch up with everything. We don't have the intention or the capability to literally walk around to all of 2,000 plus houses and ask to see their basements. So this will be of necessity a long process, but it's time to start it, I think. Councilor Bronner.
Yeah, this isn't just a residential problem.
Oh, no.
This is a commercial problem too.
Yes.
Every flat roof building that you can see from here has a water collection system that the water doesn't come out the front.
Right.
You know, it goes into the sewer, it goes into the storm, one or the other.
Right.
That are existing.
Yep.
I expect City Hall is split on whether they go into the storm or not. This is not just a residential issue.
I mean, this was very typical for years. Everything went into the sanitary sewer, whether it was stormwater, roof water, sanitary sewage, you name it, all went in the same pipe, right? And ended up dumping in the river.
The clean water cleaned it.
Right, exactly. And I don't want to understate either the importance of this oil tank issue. I cannot tell you how many sites I cleaned up in the couple of decades I did this type of work, where someone had an old rusted oil tank, and some night that rust plug just finally popped and dumped 220 gallons or 125 gallons of oil onto the basement floor. I'm sure Councilor Sykes has seen it more than once too. And it ends up in their floor drains, or it ends up in their sump pump, and it either gets pumped out onto the ground, or more likely it ends up in the sanitary sewer. And, you know, I've seen basement floors have to be dug up. This is one of the reasons why the state put a regulation into effect over 20 years ago now, requiring places to close their floor drains. Everybody used to have an open floor drain in their garage, you know, and they'd be working on cars and gas and oil would be going down. Those were all sealed or put into tanks years ago for precisely this reason of uncontrolled releases of petroleum products. But I saw as many single-family homes and businesses as anything else that were just, the tanks just gave up in the basement and dumped the whole load. Councilor Sykes, I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, I have seen it frequently in my time, and it's hard to I should say, underestimate the difficulty it causes for property owners too. So if we can take steps through this ordinance to alleviate this before there's a problem, that'd be great.
There are plastic bathtubby-like things they now make that you can sit your tank in. As the manager alluded to, you can also do a little one-level high concrete block wall around your tank, anything to stop that when and if the tank or the valve or the piping fails. Any other questions on this?
Um,
I'm going to open the public hearing after we take questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
I actually have a question to determine whether I should recuse myself from voting on this matter.
Sure.
And it appears as though the section that says that even if a storm water connection was originally permitted under the regulations in effect at the time, it still needs to now apply for a permit. And it seems like if it's a commercial application, it still has to document the flows and everything. I do have an ownership interest in the commercial building 1 Court Street that had a properly permitted stormwater connection for our roof drains at the time, but it appears as though that will be considered illicit or illegal upon enactment of this ordinance, and we would need to apply for a permit, even though it was permitted and documented at the time in its appropriate use of the storm system. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would just issue a permit in that case if we had the documentation and meets the other requirements otherwise. But quite frankly, this applies to even me. I don't have a culvert pipe in front of my house, but there is a swale that the city has. So it applies to every one of us. I would dare challenge that every single person in this city, this water comes off of my land into that swale, and that's considered part of the storm drain system. So I'd be surprised if there's a single person in the city that doesn't apply to it.
So is everyone who has stormwater drainage off their property that goes into the city stormwater system obligated to apply for a permit now?
No, if they're tying into the pipe, or they're going to be changing, if they're going to, for instance, there was a parking lot off of Water Street here. He was going to be creating all kinds of new impervious surface, and that was going to travel into the city swales and that sort of thing. So he had to obtain a permit for that. We didn't have a permit, so we did an agreement for it. That's one of the two I was telling you about.
I would think that yours, Assistant Mayor Bealow, because you never tied into the sanitary sewer. You originally, when the building was constructed, tied into the storm sewer, and you have not expanded that. You shouldn't have to do an engineering study because you're not increasing anything.
Right.
It's simply applying for the permit.
That's it. And then we can document this site as a permit. It was issued on this date and time due to the circumstances.
Right. So I would suggest you don't need to recuse yourself.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll open the public hearing on this now. Is there anyone from the public that would like to have a comment or a question on the matter we're discussing with regard to stormwater separation? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Okay. Unless there's any other questions, would someone like to make a motion on this?
Councilor Winnie will offer a motion.
Thank you, Councilor Winnie.
I'll move that the Lebanon City Council hereby adopts ordinance number 2020-07 to repeal and replace City Code Chapter 124, use of public stormwater system.
Will someone second that motion? Councilor Prentice seconds. Okay, so we will do a roll call vote on this. Councilor Heisted?
Councilor Heisted votes aye.
Councilor Sykes?
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Hill?
Councilor Hill votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice?
Councilor Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner?
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Zook?
Councilor Zook abstains since I just caught the very, very end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Winnie?
Councilor Winnie votes aye.
Thank you. Assistant Mayor Bealow?
Bealow votes yes.
Thank you. And I vote yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Our second public hearing item is ordinance 2020-10. This is a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public input and taking action to amend City Code Chapter 182 Water Service by adding an additional statutory reference, adding definitions, and adding a new section to implement water use restrictions in the event of a drought or other emergency. Make a presentation on this?
Yes, I'll have Paula speak to this one.
Okay. Assistant.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Yep, it's Paula. So yes, this is the ordinance we brought to you at the last meeting when we realized that there's currently no provision within our code to implement restrictions on the use of water during times of drought or any other water emergency. So New Hampshire RSA 4485, which is the New Hampshire Safe Drinking Water Act, provides community water systems with the authority to restrict non-essential water use when there is a threat of demand that exceeds capacity. So hopefully we're working our way out of what was or is still currently a light moderate drought here in the Upper Valley. But if we were to get into a more serious drought without the stipulations being built into our code, we would not be able to restrict water use. So by this ordinance, we're asking that you amend City Code Chapter 182 to permit us to be able to do that in the event we need to.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula. Councilors, any questions on this one? I think we discussed it at the last meeting.
Makes sense.
Seems like a very appropriate thing for us to have the ability to do. Okay, seeing no questions, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public have any comments on this? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Council Bronner.
Move that the Lebanon City Council hereby adopt ordinance number 2020-10 to amend City Code Chapter 182, Water Service, as presented in the July 15, 2020 City Council agenda packet.
Thank you, Council Bronner. Someone second Council Bronner's motion? Council Prentice seconds. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Councilor Heiston.
Councilor Heiston votes aye.
Thank you. Councilor Sykes.
Council Sykes votes yes.
Councilor Hill.
Counselor Hill votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice.
Council Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner.
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Zook.
Zook votes yes.
Councilor Winnie.
Counselor Winnie votes aye.
Assistant Mayor Bealow.
Bealow votes yes.
Thank you, and I vote yes as well, so that motion passes. Okay, that gets us to old business. We have one item of old business tonight. That's the presentation of the second reading. This is the second reading. Amendment to ordinance number 18, salary plan, Article 2, non-affiliated employees to incorporate Lebanon professional and salaried employees, La Paz, wage and classification salary plan positions, and to delete Article 3, bargaining unit employees, D, Lebanon professional and salaried employees, La Paz. And I think, do we have Gloria here too?
No, that's right.
Okay, would you like to just briefly address it?
Yeah, this is an issue of wage classification study that was done, and what we're proposing to do is they'll follow the same wage class bands, wage class system that we have for non-affiliated employees. Before that, they had their own wage scales with vacation upon steps that they will no longer have, that they'll be classified within the bands that we have for non-affiliated personnel. And they're subject to the 3% merit increase each year based upon merit, and not just on the attenuation of years of service.
Okay, councilors, this is our second reading of this. We'll have one more reading after this. Are there any questions on this as it sits right now? If not, would someone like to make the motion acknowledging the second presentation? Yes, Councilor Prentice.
Tim, make sure I'm on mute.
You're not.
Great. Okay, perfect. So I move that the Lebanon City Council acknowledges the second of 3 presentations to amend ordinance number 18, salary plan, Article 2, to integrate the Lebanon professional, administrative, and salaried employees in brackets, La Paz, into the non-affiliated compensation and classification schedule, and to remove Article 3, Section D, Lebanon professional, administrative, and salaried employees, also La Paz.
Thank you. Would someone like to second that motion?
Counselor Hill.
Councilor. Yes, thank you, Councilor Hill. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Councilor Heiston.
Councilor Heiston votes aye.
Thank you, Councilor Sykes.
Council Sykes votes yes.
Thank you, Councilor Hill.
Counselor Hill votes yes.
Councilor Prentice.
Councilor Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner.
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Zook.
Zook votes yes.
Councilor Winnie.
Counselor Winnie votes aye.
Assistant Mayor Bealow.
Bealow votes yes.
And I vote yes as well. That motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to the third reading of this fascinating topic. Okay, let's see. That moves us to new business. Item A, the dedication of the Glenwood fountain. So I think I would just like to read the background here. That makes sense. And this relates directly back to the recognition that we had earlier tonight to the fountain committee, because this is the latest and greatest fountain that committee has been responsible for bringing forward. And so I'll just read the background for the record here. The Mount Calvary in Glenwood Cemetery was established in 1862. In 1883, the city of Lebanon placed a fountain in the cemetery. It was paid for by the fees extended to families of deceased members for their burials. It's important to impart that the many people who placed this fountain in the cemetery did an incredible job of workmanship that lasted for many years. Still, the fountain was removed decades ago after it finally fell into disrepair. Several years ago, the Lebanon Fountain Working Group, also known as the Fountain Workers Group, located the original fountain foundation and photographs of it. They set forth plans to refurbish the deteriorated basin of the fountain and to find a replacement fountain close to the original one that was originally installed there. The working group has replicated the original decorative concrete basin, and they've installed a Victorian-style cast iron fountain. The new fountain incorporates the original bottom basin and the swan figures that can be seen in the yard planter situated at the Carter home. Also important to their plans was the incorporation of 8 small pillars surrounding the original basin to reflect its authentic design as established from the photographs that they found. The remaining fountain parts have been carefully curated and assembled to complement the proportions and integrity of the original fountain. To reflect more modern times and to ensure long-term serviceability, the fountain utilizes a solar-powered recycling water pump that conserves both energy and water. A protective shelter to cover the fountain in the winter months is under development. The City of Lebanon assumes responsibility for maintenance of the working fountain upon acceptance of the fountain as a gift to the city. With the Glenwood Cemetery fountain in place, Lebanon will be one fountain closer to regaining its previous reputation as the City of Fountains, and current residents will enjoy a community feature that enhances their quality of life. In terms of honoring the past, the placement of this fountain in its original setting is a poignant reminder of times past and celebrates those who have gone before us. And in our packet tonight, we have a number of photographs of the new fountain as installed. And we certainly thank Priscilla Goslin for providing the content for the background that I read into the record. We had hoped to do this dedication in person, and I hope that we can someday soon, once we're out of this current situation. But I would encourage anyone to go out to Glenwood Cemetery, take a look at the new fountain, take a look at the pictures that we have in our packet. It's truly beautiful, and I think really represents very nicely a great cooperation between a city board, a number of private donors, and a number of individuals to really come together and do something that's very special for one of the city's cemeteries. So we have an item in our agenda that's a motion that actually allows us to accept the dedicated fountain, and I would ask that someone from the council be willing to read that motion. Is there someone who'd like to read that?
I'm willing to do that.
Yes, Councilor Sykes, please do.
Yeah. As a former member of City Council representative to the Fountain Committee and working with Priscilla over the years, I know that she works very hard at doing this, and I'm really pleased that this fountain has become part of the city's legacy. So, moved that the Lebanon City Council hereby accepts the dedication of the fountain at Glenwood Cemetery from the City of Lebanon Fountain Working Group. Be it further moved that the Lebanon City Council hereby extends its sincere gratitude and appreciation to Priscilla Goslin and Linda Mae Peck and all others involved in the project for their hard work and dedication in beautifying Lebanon through the installation of fountains such as the Glenwood Fountain.
Thank you. Would someone like to second that motion? Yes, Councilor Heiston seconds. We'll take a roll call vote. Councilor Heiston.
Councilor Heiston votes aye.
Thank you. Councilor Sykes.
Councilor Sykes votes enthusiastically yes.
Councilor Hill.
Councilor Hill votes yes.
Councilor Prentice.
Councilor Prentice votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Bronner.
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Zook. Councilor Zook. You may be muted. Or we may have temporarily lost Councilor Zook. That's okay. Councilor Belo.
Belo votes yes.
And Councilor Winnie.
Councilor Winnie votes aye.
And I vote aye as well. And again, thank you very much to the working group, and to Linda May and Priscilla for doing such a great job over the years and creating this beautiful Glenwood fountain for us. So thank you again.
Mayor McNamara,
Yes.
it's Paula.
Yes.
Before you move on, we have somebody on the phone, and I'm wondering if it might be Linda May.
Oh, great. Linda May, is that you on the phone? Linda May Pack?
If you're on the phone, if you dial *6, that will unmute you and allow you to speak. Dial *6 and you can speak.
Or is it still muted?
Okay, well, maybe it's not her and somebody else is listening, and that's all fine and well, but I just
That's
wanted to
great.
give her an opportunity.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, Paula.
Yep.
Now we move on to what I eagerly look forward to every year. And that's
Hi,
our
this is Linda May.
Oh, hi, Linda May. How are you?
Doing well.
Great.
If you can permit me a few minutes to read something.
Certainly.
Priscilla and I appreciate the recognition you did for us earlier, but as the last members of the current Fountain Working Group, and knowing that we're the only ones who really know all the engagement that made it possible to have all these fountains, we would really like to be able to name all the businesses, organizations, and prominently involved people who supported us. And that's what I would read if you will allow me to.
Please do.
Okay. Well, Priscilla and I began in December 1997 as members of the Carter Fountain Committee, together with Judith McVitie, Councilors Terry Dudley and Ralph Akins, and Ken Ryder from Public Works. We were appointed to organize and oversee the restoration of the Carter Memorial Fountain in time for the 100th anniversary of its dedication on August 17, 1898. After 99 years, the fountain's detail had been lost under layers of paint, and some of the plumbing had failed. We had the fountain sandblasted. Public Works painted it and refurbished its plumbing. The Lebanon Historical Society and the Muskoma Savings Bank Foundation supported us financially. Larry Howard, a Lebanon artist, did a watercolor of the Carter Memorial Fountain with the Marion Carter House in the background. Whitman Communications, at no charge, produced prints of the original watercolor, which were given to donors of $50 or more as a thank you. After completing the Carter Memorial Fountain project, our committee was reorganized as the Lebanon Fountain Committee. Priscilla, Judith, and I continued as members, together with Councilor Patrick Hayes and Earl Labonte from Public Works. Our first project was the Coburn Park Fountain. The Lebanon Historical Society, the Muskoma Savings Bank Foundation, and community donors again supported us. The fountain, formerly owned by prominent Lebanon resident George Rogers, was purchased from the Babineau family, restored and placed in the park, and unveiled on October 31st, 2002. Our next project was the design and installation of the water feature in the Robert H. Levitt Memorial Park on High Street. The design mimics the confluence of the Muskoma and Connecticut rivers and honors Lebanon's history as a manufacturing center reliant on water power. Committee members for this project were Priscilla and I, Lorraine Morrison, Councilor Carol Dustin, and Earl Labonte. This project took 8 years from the start of planning in 2004 to its unveiling in 2012. And with all our projects, the pace of doing them was usually tied to the ease of fundraising. We were supported by the Rotary Club of Lebanon, the Timken Foundation, the Muskoma Savings Bank Foundation, Pathways Consulting, Hubert's Department Store, the Odd Fellows of Lebanon, American Legion Post 22, Ledyard Bank, and community donors. Bill Harvey Outdoorscapes did the water feature. Public Works modified the site to accommodate it. Our third project was the Lebanon Mall fountain. As early as 2002, we had hoped to again have a fountain on the mall by the 50th anniversary of the disastrous 1964 fire. Eventually, we did place the modern granite fountain on the site of a former fountain, and it was turned over to the city on November 11th, 2015. So we didn't make our time, but we got it done anyway. Committee members for this project were Priscilla, Lorraine, and I, Councilor Carol Dustin, and Bruce Kimball from Public Works. We organized a solicitation for design ideas and selected Andrew Garthwaite. He incorporated metal turtles and dolphins on the fountain to commemorate the concrete turtle and dolphin that had been in the children's play area on the mall. We were supported by the Timken Foundation, the Rotary Club of Lebanon, the Mascoma Savings Bank Foundation, the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation, One Court Street Associates, Carroll Concrete, and community donors. During this project, the Fountain Committee was reorganized as the Fountain Working Group under the Lebanon Heritage Commission. And Priscilla and I regret that by becoming a working group, we no longer had a counselor or someone from Public Works on our projects, as they had always been invaluable assets. So now we come to Priscilla's and my final project, the Glenwood Cemetery Fountain. This was the most challenging project for fundraising. Although we were supported by the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation, the Mascoma Savings Bank Donation Committee, the Renaissance Charitable Foundation, and community donors, without the large monetary gift from an anonymous donor we received in 2019, we would not have had enough money to begin work on the cemetery fountain project. Subsequently, donations of essential goods and services by Ferguson Waterworks and Carroll Concrete kept us going. Priscilla, Kyle Goslin, her son, and Paul Putnam donated evening and weekend time to the project on the order of 400 to 500 hours each from July 2019 to now, as they restored a concrete fountain basin dating to a 19th century fountain formerly in the cemetery, prepped for the new fountain we purchased, and then along with Dan LeBrun, did everything needed to get the fountain operational. For this project, as well as our 3 previous fountains, the Rotary Club of Lebanon graciously acted as our fiscal agent. So for Priscilla and me, it's been 23 years of effort, first to restore the Carter Memorial Fountain, and then to place the 4 new fountains in Lebanon. We thank all the businesses and organizations I just named. We thank all the members of the Lebanon community who took a chance that for each project, our very small group of volunteers would actually succeed in putting a fountain in a Lebanon public space, and so sent us their donations to help us along. We hope all our supporters enjoy the fountains as much as Priscilla and I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda May. And again, our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That's great. I hope everyone does enjoy the fountains as much as many of us do walking or driving by them. Okay, on to slightly more mundane items. Our annual review and readoption of the cash management and investment policy. Vicki?
Yes, this is a review and adoption of the 2020 cash management and investment policy. According to New Hampshire RSA 47:6, it requires the City Council to annually review and adopt an investment policy. There has not been any new laws or requirements that would cause us to make any changes to this, so tonight we're just looking to re-adopt the current policy as it is. As the policy states, this relates to city funds only and does not include the trustee or trust funds or the library trust monies. They're required to do their own separate policies as they manage their own funds.
Does anyone have any questions about the annual review and readoption of the cash management and investment policy? We have a sample motion on page 861, if someone would like to make it.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Councilor Bronner.
Move that the Lebanon City Council adopts the City Council Policy CC-100, Cash Management and Investment Policy, as presented in the July 15th, 2020 City Council Agenda Packet, to be effective upon passage.
Someone like to second Councilor Bronner's motion? Councilor Prentice seconds. Any further questions?
Yeah, this is Councilor Hill with,
Yes.
I guess, a comment. Two comments, actually. So one is there's a reference to the purchasing policy for the city. I don't think that's on the agenda for tonight, but I think, is that something that we review on an annual basis as well?
No. No, we do not.
Okay. Would it be possible to just have that purchasing policy sent to the city council? I'd like to review it, and I, you know, just in case anyone else wants to look at it too.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, and I guess this is just something for our finance director to think about for the future. I'm the treasurer, as the county treasurer, I've been giving some thought to the investment policy for the county. And one of the things, obviously, our investment policy at the county level looks very similar to this. But one of the objectives that I've been thinking about, or something I've been thinking about, is having a preference for keeping the keeping taxpayer dollars within, for me, it's within the county. But for the city, it might be particularly within the city, or at least with banks that have branches or a significant presence in the city, something like that. I don't need to make a motion or an amendment for tonight, but it's just something that I think might be worth considering for the future. So if that could be something that the finance director could put on the list to consider at some point, then maybe when we come back to this next year. I just think it's nice. I think taxpayers appreciate knowing that taxpayer dollars are staying within our local community as much as possible when it makes sense.
Thank you. I just had a text from Councilor Zook. Her computer has decided to sign off and will not allow her to sign back on. So we won't be hearing from her unless she has some success in the next few minutes. So let's take a vote on this one. Councilor Heiston. Councilor Heiston? He may be locked up. He's not moving. Let's skip over to him for a moment. Councilor Sykes.
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Hill.
Councilor Hill votes yes.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice.
Councilor Prentice votes yes. Oh,
Councilor Bronner.
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Winnie.
Sykes just gave you a thumbs,
Heiston, I'll look at it.
thumbs up.
You vote yes. Councilor Heiston.
Councilor Heiston votes aye.
Thank you. System Mayor Velo.
Velo votes yes.
Thank you. I vote yes, and I don't think Councilor Zook is back yet. That passes.
Council Winnie.
Councilor Winnie, I'm sorry, I forgot your Councilor Winnie.
Well, you said my name, but then Councilor Heisted was ready. Councilor Winnie votes aye.
Thank you, Councilor Winnie. Okay, the next two financial items we have are simply annual reviews. They do not require action by the council. The first one is the annual review of the fund balance policy. Keith?
The city's fund balance policy requires an annual review by the city council. This is unchanged from the 2018 adopted policy. There are no changes.
Does anyone have any questions about our fund balance policy? Again, there is no action required on our behalf. Okay. Hearing none, the annual review of capital reserve fund policy.
The city's capital reserve fund policy requires an annual review by the city council. This was established to use current revenues to pay for future capital projects in place of or in addition to traditional debt financing. No changes.
No changes. Councilors, any questions? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to release of public schools impact fees, and this does require action on our part.
Yes, every quarter that where we get impact fees, it's divided up between the school, police, fire, and rec. And right now, this school has $123,709.65 that is owed to them. So this is just giving me the authority to distribute this to the Lebanon School District.
And I believe this is, from the table I see here, the largest contribution by far.
Yes.
In the 7 years that we've been doing this. So with this contribution to date, we've contributed almost $400,000, just shy of $400,000 to the district. And I recall that this goes to the payment on the bond for the Lebanon Middle School. So of the $30 million school budget, we have paid $400,000 directly from this fund at this point. So it's made a substantive impact. Would someone like to make a motion to distribute those funds? Yes, Councilor Prentice.
Moved that in accordance with section 213.10, brackets administration of impact fees of the Lebanon zoning ordinance, the city council authorizes dispersing the sum of $123,709.65 in collected public schools impact fees to the Lebanon School District to be applied toward the payment of debt on the new middle school located at the intersection of Moulton Avenue and Route 4, consistent with the September 2010 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Lebanon and the Lebanon School District SAU 88.
Do I have a second on that? Councilor Bronner seconds. Any discussion? We'll take a voice vote. Councilor Heiston?
Councilor Heiston votes aye.
Thank you. Councilor Sykes?
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Councilor Hill?
Counselor Hill votes yes.
Councilor Prentice?
Councilor Prentice votes yes.
Councilor Bronner?
Bronner votes yes.
Councilor Winnie?
Counselor Winnie votes aye.
Assistant Mayor Bealow?
Bealow votes yes.
And I vote yes, vote unanimous on that. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, the last item on our regular agenda, before the city manager reports, obviously, is the 2020 New Hampshire Municipal Association Legislative Policy Recommendations. I think you all have a copy of that, was included in your agenda package. Sean, do you want to discuss any of those?
Probably. I'll just give you kind of an overview. This happens every 2 years. These policy committees are put together. And as you know, the city in the last couple of years have been far more actively involved in this. Assistant Mayor Bealow was actually on one of the subcommittees, and I was on one of the other subcommittees. And 2 years ago, Mayor McNamara and Councilor Hill went with me down to Concord and actually voted. It's been, I don't know how long it's been since Lebanon actually voted at a delegate voting in the policy process, but the city's been far more active in legislation that impacts municipalities at the state level than it has ever been before. And there's a number of them. The process is different this year. We took a lot of the legislative policy positions that were really what I call micro positions. And this came out of the, and put them into a far broader category. So there's fewer of them. And this is part of the discussion that came up at a mayor's meeting almost about a year ago that Mayor McNamara and I went to. Some of the big policy issues NHMA didn't have positions on because they were dealing with really particular micro issues and not the larger big picture issues that are affecting towns and cities. And I think this new process incorporates a lot of that. So this is a very changed process for NHMA, and I think it's going to provide a better result for everybody. Now, the way this works is these policy committees, the three of them put together recommendations, made amendments and changes to those. And now they've all been sent out to every town and city, because now every single town and city, there were two that were not members before. Now every single town and city is a member of NHMA once again, and that's been quite a few years since that was the case. But all of those are doing the same thing we're doing right now. They're reviewing these, and their governing body or legislative body is reviewing them. In our case, we're both governing and legislative here, and will choose a delegate or has the option of choosing a delegate to go down and vote on behalf of their community for the positions that their respective community wants to support, wants to amend, or choose to take no position on. So what we're proposing here is there's a number of these. The way we did this last time, there were quite a few that we didn't have any interest on, and we just went through those. Some of those didn't apply to us because we're a city, and we chose not to take a position on those. But what we should do is pick a delegate, and we should have some sort of position on all of these, whether it be no position at all, or in favor, or opposed, or we choose to propose an amendment to it. We can also, at this particular point, we can enter something new as a floor amendment that we want to add on there. So that's possible to do that as a form here in which to do that if we choose to do that as a city. But that requires a supermajority of the council for a new policy position to be added. That's one of the rules that's required with that. So without any further ado, we just want to go down through each one of those. If there are questions, we can, some of them are, I think, probably pretty apparent, others may need further explanation. And I would ask Assistant Mayor Bilo if there are any his particular committee that he worked on, because he has firsthand knowledge of those. Okay. I can certainly talk about mine and the Finance Committee recommendation.
So we're looking at 2 items for action tonight. The first is if we want to take a position on any of the policy recommendations listed in here, we have to take a separate motion on each one and vote upon each one separately. Now, I take it that that means that's on the general policy, not on the individual bullet points.
Well, my suggestion would be, because we have to do roll call votes, is to have a slate, maybe have a consensus on each one of them, and then vote on all of them together as one package. It might be a lot easier for you. And this, I expect this is going to take more than one night, maybe a dozen. That might be the easiest way to go.
Okay, well, we'll see how far we get. And then the second item we need to do is it would be great to have a delegate represent the city in November at the Legislative Policy Conference. I would certainly volunteer to do that. I've done it once before with Councilor Hill, but if someone else is adamant that they'd like to do it, I'm certainly willing to have someone else go as well. So let's start on the individual policy recommendations themselves, and we'll look at the overall recommendation, and then if any of the councilors want to talk about specific bullet pointed items under that, we can make modifications as needed. So the first one is local government, entitled local government, local authority and efficiency. And the position is that the NHMA supports maintaining local government authority without infringement by the state, and supports measures that enable municipalities to exercise existing authority more efficiently and with greater discretion. And specifically, the NHMA supports legislation granting towns the same authority to adopt ordinances that cities have under RSA 4717. Obviously, that doesn't apply to us. Secondly, the authority of municipalities to regulate and limit the use of firearms on municipal property. This does involve us. It came up a couple of years ago. And to regulate the carrying of firearms by municipal employees while on duty. Third, legislation allowing a town by vote of its legislative body to authorize appointment of the town clerk or town clerk tax collector by the governing body or by the chief executive officer based on town charter. And fourth, legislation allowing municipalities to satisfy notice publication requirements for the use of electronic notification rather than by newspapers, in addition to posting notice in public places. Obviously, this, as newspapers, unfortunately, go into some demise, this is particularly appropriate at this time. And NHMA opposes legislation that detracts from existing local authority. Does anyone have any feelings for or against any of these, or for or against the policy in general?
I think it's a good policy to be for, Councilor Bilo.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice?
I agree with Councilor Bilo. It's like kind of one of those questions, like why wouldn't we support this? But I'm pleased. So you say that when it talks about limit the use of firearms on municipal property, this does include the schools?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
Yes, it does.
I don't know if they made a distinction. I know it's municipal, but just in case.
No, I believe that it involves the school districts as well.
It does, because they are considered municipalities, they're independent governmental entities. Just so you know, NHMA, if there's a bill specifically that applies to schools, we don't normally take a position on that, but this is for a more broad-based bill that would change the provisions of RSA 159, which would apply to all municipalities.
So I think, as there are a few to go through here, why don't we do these one by one, just in case we don't get there tonight? Will all of them, so would someone like to make a motion with regard to the adoption of the policy on local authority and efficiency?
I think having to do a roll call on each of these could take a long time. And unless we hear that there's a counselor objects, I think we should consider there's a consensus to support it. I mean, these were all consensus-based recommendations coming out of the specific work groups that worked on these that represented a broad diversity of towns and cities.
Okay, I'm willing to do that. I'd like to, if we're going to do that, I'd like to try to get through all of them this evening, and there's quite a number, so that we don't end up going back and trying to remember what we talked about the week before. So I'm fine with that, and I can try to move through it fairly quickly unless we get stalled. We'll see what happens. Yes, Councilor Prentice.
I wanted to just know what the due date, like when did we have to have this done by? Not looking to not get it done tonight, but if there was something that was going to take us longer time for discussion, do we have another meeting, or is it we just gotta roll with this tonight?
Yeah, this is not going to happen until October, so we just have to direct our delegates. So we have until then, and I'm the one who actually picks the date. We're still working on the date. It's going to be a virtual meeting, so we've got time.
Well, why don't we do this then? It's only 8:15 now. We are going to go into a non-public later. Why don't we try to get through the first 4 or 5 of them tonight? And I'll just mark that we've got through the first 4 or 5, and then we'll just pick up, and every meeting we'll try to knock off a few. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Prentice?
Just one general question, and I'll direct it to City Manager Mulholland. So between the time these are drawn up and now, considering, COVID, has the NHMA changed or is considering any changes, or what the impacts might be on some of these different positions?
Not so much on the positions, but there are certainly bills, and I'm going to talk about one of those in my report, due to COVID-19, that a change needs to occur. And I have drafted the changes to that statute, but I'll get into that. And I just need permission from you folks to move forward with it, because I don't do that unilaterally.
All right, just it's kind of like layering over everything, or the lens of everything right now. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yes, Assistant Mayor Biello.
On page 10, we did discuss the economic development policy that we actually recommended, that Sean had drafted, and it did incorporate the notion of recovery, economic recovery, into the policy statement. So that's one place where it's actually part of the title: economic development, recovery, and vitality. So there's some language that recognizes that we're going to be in an economic recovery process for some period of time.
Thank you, Assistant Mayor Biello. Let's try to get through a few of those before we go to City Manager reports then. So the next one is the Right to Know law. NHMA supports the purposes of the Right to Know law to ensure the greatest possible public access to the actions, discussions, and records of all public bodies, and to ensure government's accountability to the people. NHMA also supports measures to make the law clearer and make compliance with public access requirements easier and less burdensome for public officials and employees, and less costly for taxpayers. And the specific points are that the NHMA supports reasonable requirements to make governmental records available electronically if no additional cost is involved. They support the ability to recover reasonable labor costs for responding to voluminous, excessive, or vexatious record requests. I haven't said that one in a while. Exemptions from disclosure that are easy to administer and that provide appropriate protection for confidential and other sensitive information. An expedited and inexpensive process for resolving right to know complaints. And legislation and funding to provide support for education about the right to know law. So there is no opposition on that. It's just these 5 points of support. Any questions on that? Okay,
Mayor McNamara, I believe.
yes. Councilor Hill.
Councilor Hill, can you please just open it up to the public and see if there's anyone who wants to speak on this issue?
Sure. Is there anyone from the public that wants to speak on the right to know law points that the NHMA is looking to support here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jeremy Katz. I live on Bank Street. I'm in Ward 3.
Yes.
And just wanted to make a couple comments of this because I've been involved with several of the newspapers in the state and the New England First Amendment Coalition as well. And the wording here in NHMA's approach to right to know is often really cloaking to make the right to know more restrictive and essentially make documents less available to the public. Look, I've lived in Lebanon for 21 years now, and I think that everything is really well managed in our city, but it's not necessarily the case in other cities. And if you look at some of these terms, I think they're problematic, and I would really appreciate it if maybe the council took a little bit more scrutiny in looking at what they really might be saying before, in fact, endorsing the NHMA's platform on this. Essentially, when you see words like harassing or voluminous or excessive or vexatious, those words have historically been used to describe people who are annoying, who often are onto something. And if you look at, for instance, what we've learned from Black Lives Matter, from instances of excessive use of force, a lot of times that has come about from people digging through public records and public reports and exposing them and making them public. Again, not that in Lebanon it's an issue, because I don't really believe it is, but statewide it might be. And additionally, with terms like reasonable requirements to make governmental records available electronically if no additional cost is involved. I work in the technology business. There's always cost involved in converting to a digital or electronic format. So an adverse interpretation of words like this really could mean let's find a way to say no to everything because there's always a cost involved. Similarly with exemptions from disclosure. So my sense is that by and large, we have government for the purpose of supporting and representing the people that put the government in, and to be accountable for the people. And these days, I'm not entirely sure a lot of us people have a lot of faith in many forms of government that exist on a perhaps national or statewide basis. And to the extent that any of the NHA platform could be misinterpreted in any way to restrict or otherwise limit access of the public to the documents that technically they own, I think that would be a problem. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. Would you be willing to submit sort of a written summary of your comments to the council?
Sure, absolutely. Should I send them into the clerk?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Be great to have for the record as well as the verbal here. Thank you.
Sure.
So Mayor McNamara, this is Karen.
Yes.
Karen Leo Hill. I would say based on that, I think that's very thought-provoking. I would say based on that, I would request that we not take a consensus position on this yet tonight and think about returning to this issue at a later meeting.
That sounds good to me. That's what this discussion is all about, so that's great. We'll revisit this one. Thank you. Yes, Assistant Mayor Biello.
I would just like to comment that I think some of these words mean what they say, and they're not intended to mean the opposite of what they say. So, for example, it says NHMA supports the purposes to ensure the greatest possible public access to actions, discussions, and records to ensure government accountability. But I think it's also true that there are significant ambiguities in the law, and sometimes compliance is difficult because of those ambiguities. So seeking clearer and making compliance less burdensome isn't necessarily a bad thing. And making it less costly for taxpayers as well, which goes to the point about reasonable requirements to make governmental records available electronically if no additional cost is involved. In some cases, some governmental entities that said, no, the law says we have to give you a paper copy, and we can charge you for that paper copy, even though its original form is a PDF, and somebody could have simply emailed the PDF. So I think those words actually, I think the intention there is to actually make electronic records that are already in that format more readily available at little or no cost. Because now sometimes there is a cost that's charged, even though, you know, it is take a minute or two to email it, but that's not the kind of cost the law is allowing recovery of at this point.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have more discussion on this one in particular.
Yeah, I could go over a lot of this because this is the committee that I sat on.
Okay.
NHMA has never had a policy on this before, and there's a whole lot behind this. NHMA is the only entity actually doing training for municipal officials. No state agency has chosen to even do that. And we're light years ahead of where we were. And it really is not the intent to diminish the public's access. It's actually to help that. And I've testified a number of bills from my previous community, as well as NHMA, to actually make it easier to allow for electronic records. In fact, I'm going to talk about one of those tonight that further makes it easier to do that. They help write that language with NHMA.
Great, thank you. We will revisit this one. Let's try to get through a couple more. Yes, Sister Gabriela.
I also wanted to say that I think there's real merit to supporting an expedited and inexpensive process for resolving right-to-know complaints. Because right now, if the agency rules that something can be considered confidential commercial information, the only recourse for the public to get that document is to litigate through the court system. And often those cases have to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So some other states have like ombudsmans that will try to arbitrate it. There's usually a recourse to the courts, but right now there's no intermediate step between a governmental agency saying, no, you can't have it, and going all the way through a litigation, which unnecessarily drags out and adds costs to the public if they disagree with the public agency decision on disclosure.
Thank you. That might be a point that we ask the NHMA to add to their.
Oh, no, it's right here. It's in here.
It is, okay. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It's the fourth one. I see it. Okay.
And we did support that bill. Unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere for the ombudsman because we thought it was a good idea as well.
Okay. Okay, I do want to get to at least the next one on elections because we obviously have an election coming up. The NHMA believes that state and local elections should be fair and open, that voting should be simple and convenient without risking election integrity or security, and that election processes should be efficient without imposing undue burdens on local officials. The NHMA supports establishment of an independent redistricting commission to draw election districts fairly and without regard to partisan advantage. That to me is a very big one. Supports local autonomy over town and city elections. Supports more frequent state review and approval of electronic ballot counting devices. Supports registration and voting processes that are not unnecessarily complex or burdensome either to voters or to election officials. Supports the use of secure technology such as electronic poll books to make election processes more efficient. Supports greater flexibility in the processing of absentee ballots, and supports state assistance for the cost of accommodations for disabled voters in local elections. Anyone have any comments on those?
This is Councillor Hill. I do have a couple comments. I think I've noticed that the absentee this year, because of the state of emergency over COVID-19, that now people who are concerned about the risk of exposure to COVID-19 are going to be able to check the box to request an absentee ballot based on disability. So even if they don't necessarily consider themselves a disabled person, normally that because of COVID-19, they can request a ballot for that purpose. I guess in general, I think that is a good idea, and I guess I'm not sure that it should be only related to COVID-19. It seems, I guess I would support efforts to allow greater ease or no, I guess essentially I would support no excuse absentee ballots. And I would like to ask if the city council, if others on the city council would also agree that, because I'd like to add that. And the other thing is that we also, some communities had to change their, change their town meeting day because of COVID. Last year, I think there was like a blizzard, right? Okay, so maybe Councilor Prentice can talk to that more. So I would be in support of also providing greater autonomy to local officials to be able to change those town meeting days or local elections based on, local conditions, whether they're weather related or some other emergency situation related. So those are my two issues with regard to this.
Thank you. Councilor Prentice, did you have a comment?
Just two things quickly, maybe three, but easy enough. So this is one of the places now, Councilor Hill just said, like, there's some things that we should look at changing here, like the flexibility, people shouldn't have to check disability. Like and I know we've talked about that, I think last year or the year before, in another discussion, we talked about why people make the choice for an absentee ballot, and that some of them aren't comfortable checking that disability box, so they don't vote at all. It should just be, it just should be up to the person. But that being said, this is one where there's already been some movement around COVID-19. So the box that says disability, that's supposed to be, looking at that being changed. And I think Councilor Sykes can probably speak to that and the legislation that is moving that forward. But this is one of the places, like in their opening statement, where maybe, now looking forward with the size of this pandemic and just considering the future, hopefully nothing like this will happen again, should it say, without risking election integrity or security or the health of the public. This is one of those places where, would that language, be broad enough so that it kind of carries on further. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. I'm certainly a supporter of vote by mail. I think it has to be a complete package so that you can ensure the integrity of the election, and you can't leave it open to someone accusing, millions of fake ballots going out or anything like that. So I think as a complete package, vote by mail is not a bad idea at all. And certainly it's done in some states. I think Colorado may be one of them, and there's several others. Oregon, for example, where it appears to have worked extremely well. So it's doable, in my opinion anyway. Any other councilors have any input to offer on elections at this point? Okay. Yes, Assistant Mayor Buell.
I would support proposing a policy to allow excuseless absentee balloting or mail-in voting. I think we have to be careful how we craft that, because I think that probably could be controversial with some towns and cities, and realize that we may not prevail, but my guess, and maybe Sean knows this, maybe this was brought up, but there wasn't really a consensus to include it. But I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, so the concern is this is tantamount, some say, to early voting for those states that have that, because that's what that allows. And some of the arguments against that is you have people voting on a certain day a week, or even before that they vote, and then the situation changes, candidate drops out, or some new information comes out and they've already voted, and they don't have an opportunity to change that. That's some of the arguments against that. Certainly it's a lot more convenient for people who work and have to get out of the polls that don't have the time to do that. I'm not saying that I agree with it, I'm just telling you those are the arguments against that. It is very divisive. As you know, election issues now become extremely partisan. They didn't used to be that way, but now they are. Either you're on one side or the other. Of course, that's with just about everything these days, unfortunately. And that was the concern by the people on this committee, that would be an issue that would come up. We're gonna have to deal with that.
I'd like to ask a question of the city.
Yeah, Councilor Sykes.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, the bullet point that says more frequent state review and approval of electronic ballot counting devices. Can you give me a little more detail on that?
Yeah, we've got machines that are at this point completely outdated and they can't even be repaired. I don't know how to best say this, but there's not a whole lot of confidence in the progressiveness of the Secretary of State's office to new ways of doing things.
I do.
Yes. So that's a significant concern, and there seems to be a significant unwillingness to change with the changing times. Now, having said that, also in fairness to the Secretary of State, he's also very concerned about security, and those are legitimate concerns, real legitimate concerns, especially in the last several elections that we've had. So there's a two-way street here, there's a dual issue on that. But there are communities that want to move forward, for instance, with poll books and newer technology, and they've run into a stone wall, not even interested in looking at it, and that's the concern.
And as part of that discussion, was there any consideration for lack of a better phrase, a mandatory spot check on machines for one race only in a particular ward? So, or in each of the 3 wards, as an example. In other words, that would then more accurately ensure the public that that machine is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
I'm going to answer that for you, Councilor Sykes. So before every election, all of the voting machines are tested. So we run all the ballots through 4 times in every different direction, and we, prior to doing that run through, hand tally everything and compare it against what the machine says. It's mandatory. All of us have to test them. So there are spot checks in place for every single race, for every single ward.
I know. Thank you, Kristen. I'm well aware of that's what the way you do it now. I'm just curious if something should be done after too. That's all.
Like a recount, kind of? Is that what you're asking? Is like a recount of?
Can you check the machines after?
Yeah. So after the machines, after the polling closes, take a random race in a random ward or even all 3 wards and check it, against what the machine is reporting. I understand you check them all and they're perfect when they leave your office and end up at the polls. But, and I don't know enough about the technology, but for the sake of discussion, they are electronic. They get an extra heavy bump on the way to where they're going, and they've got a little glitch.
Well, at the end of the elections, we do reconcile every ballot that's cast through, and we do check the numbers to help ensure. We check the races to see that it's all adding up to what the numbers are reporting. Are you saying that we should hand count all of the ballots for one particular race?
That was what I was asking about, yes.
Hand count, that would be a very big undertaking.
Well, I have no doubt, but frankly, there's a lot of concerns about election integrity, and anything that we can do to assuage those concerns, to my mind, is useful. Enough said. I just wondered if that was part of it. Apparently not. Maybe it requires a different solution.
It would require some changes in the laws, because after the elections are complete, before the ballots even leave the polling place, they are sealed up and wrapped with special tape and signed by election officials so that they can't be tampered with. So we'd actually have to have something in the law that would protect us for us opening all of those to go through all of the races.
And I didn't imagine it would be just the city. I mean, I'm thinking statewide. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Councilor Hill.
Well, thank you. I think what it sounds like what Councilor Sykes is talking about is some kind of like a random reconciliation that would just help us ensure. And, you know, it does happen. Like, I'm reminded of, you know, a few years ago, I had a very, very close election where I think I won by 8 votes or something like that. And so we ended up having a recount. And so it does happen right now, not by law, but just kind of by coincidence, because there are a certain number of races throughout the state that do end up being close enough that they have to do a recount. It might be interesting to actually just use those to serve in that purpose, because I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is that it is already happening, that kind of a reconciliation. It is already happening. I don't know how widespread, but I'm sure that every election there are a certain number of races that are, you know, throughout the state that happen to be close enough. As I recall, I think the hand count compared to the, you know, computer, the ballot count by the machine was like within 2 votes, and that was out of over 1,000 votes. So it was a very small margin of error. But if that data could be somehow compiled together, maybe that would be one way of helping give people confidence in the integrity of the election. So maybe it's not necessarily creating something new, but maybe just rather compiling all that information on the recounts that are already happening.
Thank you. Council Bronner.
Yeah, I'm in favor of having a mail ballot. And I'm also curious is, rather than actually mailing it, couldn't we have our own mailboxes in front of City Hall or in front of each polling place where people that had a mail ballot could just deposit their ballot and not have to go through the mail?
So
Deliver it directly to the city.
So right now, the way the law is written for returning your ballot, you do either have to mail it to us or deliver it in person, which the in-person part's kind of hard right now, this close to the public, so I'll have to get creative with that.
So somebody would have to actually take the hand off.
So we can't use a drop box right now. However, there is some potential changes coming through that might allow us to utilize the Dropbox. So I had a meeting with the Secretary of State's office Tuesday morning. I'm hoping in another week or 2 I'll have guidance on that issue, because that is a good thing to have in place.
And have one at every bus stop or wherever people that didn't have transportation could easily get to.
Yep. Yeah. So they are thinking about different ways that they can allow us to do it, but right now it's a statutory thing. That's why we're not able to do it here in Lebanon.
We had talked to the AG's office, Kristen and I both, several weeks back about getting emergency order that will allow that change, even if we had to stand out there and static, because the concern is that there's nobody there. What if somebody reaches in there somehow or is able to change the ballots? And I said, well, what if we staff those at certain times so people can drop them off? And they seem to think that might be a better idea, but then they were going through the process of what it would take to actually allow emergency order to do just that.
Or drops a lighted cigarette there and burns all down.
Yes, that's part of the concern. So, you know, it is good, and the goal is, our goal is to make it easier for the voter to do what they need to do, but there are the security concerns, and they are real concerns, although I think it's probably unlikely someone's gonna knock over that green box out there, but there is tampering from foreign nationals and that sort of thing at work.
I mean, we're a small enough community, it's not that big an issue. But if you're a much larger community, I can see where it could be a serious problem. I like the idea of Dropbox.
Yeah, I mean, as it is, if I have to, I'm gonna borrow the old ticket box from the Opera House, and I'll park myself out there and just sit out there all day taking in the ballots if I have to, but we're gonna find a way to make it convenient, however we can do it.
But it seems to me like, for instance, in this particular building, it's an old bank, so there's a mail slot in there, and it goes in a vault. And if we only have a certain number of people who have the combination of that vault, it's not like knocking over a green box out the street that you can pick up and move. It's a little bit different. So I mean, there are circumstances, and in fact, a lot of town and city halls just are doing that work right now in their buildings to allow for drop-offs for safe occasions. A lot of them have them already. It's not difficult to create that. to drop it, not difficult at all, relatively inexpensive. So that's the kind of stuff that we had talked about with this policy position, to make things easier, allow more flexibility to do just that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna call it quits on that one right now, and I won't be here for the August 5th meeting, but I assume that Assistant Mayor Beal will be running at me, and he will pick up from here. So, great. I'd like to move to city manager report tonight, because we have a few of those, and then we have a non-public after that.
Okay, Westboro Yard. I did get an email today from DOT, and the project is officially on hold, as we expected it would be due to the state financial situation. But I did get that email today, and I did forward that email to our state reps just to make them aware. And I mean, that's to be expected under the circumstances. The state has a significant shortfall in revenue, and it's taking what I would suggest are appropriate steps until they can address that issue. I know the governor is anticipating or hoping that this COVID-19 relief bill that's in the Senate now, past the House, will pass, and that will provide money for revenue loss to the state of Hampshire as well as municipalities, and go a long way to address a lot of the I'll call it lack of revenue to the state because of COVID-19. So he's waiting on that, and he said that to myself and the mayor on the weekly conference calls that we have with the governor, and that's what we're waiting for. And of course, the concern is if we don't address this issue, the funding doesn't come through from the federal government, we may lose the appropriation, and it's taken a long time to get to this point, which means we have to start all over again in the next legislative process, next budget process, which should be very frustrating, because we know it took quite a lot to get to where we are today. Other projects went by the wayside so that this could go through. So that's the risk that we are at, and it is what it is. 387 North Main Street, that's the building that has been condemned on 155B. We have a court order on that. We have an RFP process underway, but fortunately, the original contractor that the property owner had hired but did not pay to do the work has subsequently paid, issued a deposit to that contractor to move forward the work. So that contractor is moving forward on the work, and that building could be knocked down by the end of July. We're going to continue to move forward in case that doesn't happen, because we've been this route before. I don't want to take any chances. We'll do a dual track on this, but if the property owner knocks it down at his own cost and we don't have to go through the lien process, that is certainly better for us. So that's where that stands. Great. Code violation enforcement, we're changing the process by which we conduct enforcement efforts. I should say the intensity in which we conduct enforcement efforts for life safety code violations that the fire department manages under the NFPA codes, and the building codes and planning regulations that we have. We have one particular property owner that's has got some very serious violations, and we are taking court action and issuing fines and using all the methods that the statute allows to enforce that. My concern is, and of course the fire chiefs as well, is that we do not want to have a situation where we have a fire and we have people that are killed because we have violations of codes to simply install fires, a smoke detector. Basic stuff that we're all familiar with in multifamily buildings. We have illegal apartments in some cases, and we're taking extreme action on that to address those issues. In fact, we have one who vacated the residence out of the property. It's not habitable, it doesn't have adequate egress, there's no smoke detector, that sort of thing. So we're going to be using a team approach to do this, which we haven't done before. This has been very effective in Manchester and some of the other cities in the southern tier, or larger communities in the southern tier, and that's the approach we're taking here. That does not mean we're going to go out there and turn over every stone and go in every single apartment building and start issuing fines to everybody. We don't have the resources to do that. But when we do receive reports, we're going to use this multidisciplinary approach and take action when it's appropriate. We always issue warnings first, but if people don't heed those warnings, we will issue citations, and we will file for injunctions to get these issues addressed so we don't have a very bad situation in our community that has occurred in other communities. Greenway extension to West Lebanon, we have talked about this for a long time. We are finalizing an agreement with Barry, what's Barry's last name? Schuster, Barry Schuster. Yeah, we were gonna pay him to do that, but he's agreed to do it for us and just cover the expenses. He's done that once before for the city to extend the Greenway. So that's a no small thing to do that. And that's to get the connection where we presently end the Greenway over to Riverside Park. And that's gonna be a long process. It's probably gonna require, if we can't get agreement with the railroad, a battle at the Transportation Safety Board, which we've got a path, we think, in which to do that, working with our Senators Hassan and Jay, thank you, Flea. Yes. Anyway, so that's moving forward now, and I'm not gonna wait till next year. We're gonna move forward as soon as Barry is ready to do that. That's gonna be a big help to the city to get that done. 714, there's the storm we had 2 days ago. We had some damage in the city infrastructure. I did send out a report this evening to you. You probably haven't had a chance to read that. Assistant Mayor Beal asked for a summary update. We have provided that. And I think Jim is still on the line, is he not? He might be gone. He's gone. But anyway, I did send I forwarded his report to all of you to take a look at this so you get some idea of that. Any questions on that for those of you who might have already looked at it? You had a chance to do so? I have not looked at it. Yeah, I sent it out just before the meeting. Yeah.
Do we have anything that's substantive?
No, we got some erosion damage here and there. We had to use additional chemicals at the treatment plant due to all the turbidity that was coming out of the water. We had flooding at the city hall due to a roof leak, but that the construction company is responsible for dealing with all that because they own the site over there right now. Trees down in a number of locations. But I mean, it was a pretty significant storm, no question about it. And, you know, we got some erosion issues and it's definitely noteworthy. The crews are around all day, that day, and into the evening dealing with that. And some of those issues still have not been addressed. It'll take a longer period of time for us to fix those. But the report kind of covers that in there. And then I wanted to talk, I already alluded to this earlier. I have drafted changes to RSA 295E, which is electronic documents, electronic signatures. There's some provisions in there that we asked the governor to issue an emergency order to allow to deal with some of the lack of clarity in that, and the governor did do that. That's only good during COVID-19. Once the emergency is lifted, then we're back to the old provisions in there. Those provisions say municipalities, in essence, I'm just paraphrasing, can use electronic signatures and electronic documents to the extent permitted by the Secretary of State's office and DOIT. Well, that was like 9 years ago, and DOIT and Secretary of State's office have never issued any administrative rules whatsoever or any guidance on that. So there comes the question, well, can municipalities do that at all unless there's an administrative rule that allows for it? I have made several inquiries to DOIT and the Secretary of State's office with no response, basically, and no answer to whether or not they have any administrative rules. Now, of course, if they do, they're supposed to be posted on the GelCar site, and there's none there. But just in case, I want to cover the base, and I have not received a response from them, which is kind of strange, but normally they reply to those, but they didn't. Anyway, I drafted changes to that legislation, that present law, run it through NHMA, and I will send it out to you. I should not be requesting changes to laws without, because I act on behalf of the city, without your permission to do so. So I want you to take a look at that, and I'll send it out to you. And I need to get a sponsor, a state rep or a state senator to sponsor that.
I'm sure we can find some.
Yes, we might be able to find someone to do that. But anyway, I'll need some guidance from you on that. And that covers the issues that I have. What's the questions for me?
So how would you like to, we're going to go out of this meeting into non-public and then back into this meeting? How would you like to do this?
Yeah, so what you would do is you would read the provisions in there under RSA 91A, under, let's see, section, let's see.
This one, right?
No, it's going to be this one. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go into non-public session here. This is a. Yes, Councilor Beal.
Just before we do that, I just wanted to say I apologize for missing the committee report section of the council meeting 2 weeks ago. I wasn't feeling well and actually didn't wake up till right before the council meeting. I'm much better. But I didn't really report on a major development related to LEAC, which is that the PUC approved a settlement in Liberty Utilities distribution rate case that gave us everything we wanted in the special contract to be able to own our own LED street lighting and to use network controls for those, and some other details. So the commission approved that right at the end on June 30th, actually. So that went into effect July 1st. And since that time, just yesterday, the RFPs for the LED streetlight conversion have been issued through the Department of Public Works and are available on the city's website. So that has been a project that's been like 2 or 3 years in the works, or more like a decade in the works. And we're finally moving ahead in a way that'll hopefully be a good model for other communities who want to take this up to another level.
Thank you. Okay, what I'm looking for now is a motion by someone on the council that we enter into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3 2A, which is the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Council Bronner makes that motion. Will someone second that motion? Council Prentice seconds. Okay, we will go into non-public session.
Well, you need to vote.
Yeah, we're not, sorry. You take a roll call vote. Councilor Beal.
Beal votes yes.
Councilor Bronner.
Bronner votes yes.
Thank you, Councilor Hill.
Councilor Hill, yes.
Thank you, Councilor Heisted. Councilor Heisted.
He's on mute.
You're on mute. Councilor Heisted.
Councilor Heisted votes aye.
Thank you. Mayor McNamara votes yes. Councilor Prentice.
Votes yes. Prentice, yes.
Thank you. Councilor Smith. Councilor Sykes.
Councilor Sykes votes yes.
Councilor Winnie.
Councilor Winnie votes aye.
Thank you. And I don't think Councilor Zook is back with us. Are you, Councilor Zook? No, sure, she's absent. Okay. We're going to go into non-public session at 8:57.
So just so we're clear about this, and when we get done in non-public session, we will simply come out and adjourn. No other business will be handled by the council because we will not be going back onto the record. So that'll be the end of the meeting once this non-public is complete.
The general topic is personnel matters.
So what we're going to obviously leave this meeting, and I provided the link to all of you to go into to enter into the non-public session. And we will be with you shortly. Thank you.
So am I done
When
for
to send
tonight?
that, Mr. Manager, so I can find it more
Yeah.
easily?
I